Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm very excited to bring you a look at the new Transformers Studio Series number 82, Ratchet from Transformers Bumblebee. Ratchet is an all-new mold based on his appearance in the introductory scene of the Bumblebee movie, and he sports a very Generation 1 based design with some of the movie stylings and then some more alien elements to show his Seibertronian alt mode. In fact, he's one of 3 figures in this Deluxe class wave to be part of that movie. The others being Brawn and Wheeljack, who I'll be reviewing shortly. And then the 4th figure in the wave was the Studio Series 86 Perceptor. So, if you've seen my reviews before, you know this goes. We're going to take a look at Ratchet's packaging. Then we'll open up, we'll see the instructions, and we'll see Ratchet himself in both vehicle and robot modes. At some point in the video, I'll be taking a look at his backdrop. Naturally, I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So here you can see Ratchet in your standard Deluxe Studio Series packaging, which is a bit roughed up because it's another toy I got from Amazon, also shipped in a very thin plastic envelope with no padding. I mean, they just really don't care anymore, do they? They got your money, and you're just going to take it. But you can see we got a bit of a half window here. We can see Ratchet's upper body, and you get this nice render of the character, which is very detailed. It looks like it was pulled like straight out of the movie there. You get his name, his number, 82. Your Bumblebee movie call-out, branding, all that fun stuff. On the side, you get his number in big font here, close-up of his face. And then on the back, you get renders of Ratchet in vehicle and robot modes. He takes 22 steps to transform, which is not bad for a Deluxe. His backdrop is the Seibertron Falls backdrop, which is probably just going to be the exact same one used for all of these intro scene characters from Bumblebee the movie. And then he's got some flavor text right here that says, as the Decepticons launch their final assault, Ratchet and the Autobots find themselves outnumbered and flee Seibertron in the escape pods. Now, I wonder how much like the other characters' bios or flavor text are going to differ from that, or if they're just going to like swap the name out. We'll see if they get more creative. So yeah, there's the packaging. There's a slightly more zoomed out render of Ratchet right there, where you can see a lot more of his legs. And that's it. So let's go ahead and open it up. Okay, here's the instruction sheet for Ratchet. So you get his name, number, render, all his branding and logos. Here, this shows you how to have him wield his long rifle type weapon, or even store it on his back. I really like that back storage, it's pretty cool. And then we just do the transformation to his vehicle mode, which wraps around the back, right here. And then a quick little how-to for attaching the rifle to the top. So everything you need in one little sheet. Now we can see Ratchet's vehicle mode, and it looks more like some sort of armored shuttle than it does an ambulance, which is fine. I mean, it makes sense that he wouldn't be driving an ambulance around because those probably don't exist as we know them on Seibertron. So as a pre-Earth form, this really works, and I think this whole domed cockpit thing is, a really interesting take. And you can see he's got his weapon on the top, which normally I'm not a fan of when they slap weapons on top of vehicle modes. But again, because it is an alien design, it doesn't look wrong like it would on, say, an actual, Earth-based ambulance. So I really don't mind that at all. I think it just makes them look more battle-ready, and because they are in the middle of a, million-year war, it really just makes sense. Now, I will say this vehicle mode is a lot smaller than I expected it to be. It's very compact. I mean, look at it. Just fits all up in my hand here. Really, really tiny. So it appears that in, the Bumblebee movie universe, Ratchet and Ironhide are not quite the large characters that we're used to them being in, G1 or the Bayverse movies, which again isn't a bad thing. Different continuity, and as long as he's at least decently recognizable as the character, I think that's totally fine if maybe this incarnation's not terribly tall. As far as his rolling, he has some dragging issues going on, and that's because of these forearms hanging out under the bottom, and I have them pushed in as far as they're willing to go, but it appears it's just not quite enough to prevent some rubbing. I guess that helped a little bit, but you can still feel some more friction than you should have there. He also uses those stupid peg through wheels that I really just despise the look of. The wheels themselves look good. They have this really interesting spiral kind of tread pattern around the outside. And then the inside has a very different style of, hubcap type finishing. that's done in what appears to be a different shade of white than the rest of him, but that might just be a color matching thing. Has more of a bluish quality, but that could just be because it's painted onto this like dark gray plastic here, so I'm not sure. But either way, I like the effect. I like that the hubcaps are a slightly different tone than the rest of them. Helps them stand out a bit. Got that Autobot symbol on the front. Really good paintwork for this like grill area here. Not much on the back, but if you're not used to that in modern Transformers by now, well, you should get used to it. Would have been nice if they painted these little lights, but oh well. And overall, I'd say a pretty solid vehicle mode. It's something unique and interesting and different, which is always a good thing in a franchise that can sometimes tend to stagnate. Here's Ratchet's backdrop, the Seibertron Falls scene. And you can see like some Seekers and stuff fighting in the background, explosions everywhere. And I'm showing off in vehicle mode because he's one of the relatively few Studio Series Transformers that can actually fit on his backdrop well in vehicle mode. That's because it's so very small. So you can go ahead and put him on there if you want to display him in that vehicle mode and have him look like he's, driving through a battle. It works pretty well here. Here's our first comparison shot with two other Ratchets. On the left, we have Transformers Siege Ratchet, who is the only other Cybertronian mode Ratchet toy that's been made so far. Except maybe animated. I think animated might have had one, but I don't have that one. And then on the right, we have the first Studio Series Ratchet, based on the Autobot medic from the first live-action movie. And, there is a debate as to whether or not these two would be the same character, and that goes for any of the, characters that appear in both Bumblebee and the other live-action films. But because there's that possibility, I'd like to, go ahead and just kind of show them off together. So, for one, this guy's obviously, by far the most different, both in the fact that he is an actual Earth vehicle and the fact that he has a completely different coloration. So, these two are just more of a group shot. These two, I especially want to look at because they're both Cybertronian vehicles that are colored like an Earth-based ambulance. So, you can see they both are achieving very, very different things. Now, one of my big criticisms of Siege was the fact that a lot of the, Cybertronian vehicle modes looked very, very close to the normal Earth-based alt modes that those characters tend to have. And, had predicted that, I think they're going to just retool a lot of these guys and, reshell them into Earth modes and sell them back to us again. And for the most part, yeah, that prediction came true. That was true for Ratchet here. That was true for the Sideswipe mold, Ultra Magnus. Shockingly, not true for Prowl and his mold mates. They actually designed entirely new molds for those guys. That kind of surprised me. But it did end up being true in a lot of the cases. And, it's a little frustrating because then there's really not much setting them apart from their Earth counterparts that just ended up being sold, a year or two later and frustrated a lot of collectors. Now, even though this Ratchet was retooled into an Earth mode, I actually like him more than a lot of the other Siege vehicle modes because he is more alien-looking than the others. He doesn't really strictly look like an actual ambulance and, has much more of an armored carrier design very similar to this. It is, as you can see, though, significantly larger. I mean, when you put them against each other, he's almost twice the size of our new one here. So, they're definitely going for very different looks and body types here. When we look at the Bayverse Ratchet, his vehicle mode is also bigger than this one, but not by nearly as much. I don't even think there's an inch difference between them in length, so... Yeah, all sorts of different scales here. Now, this Ratchet is pretty tall. He just compacts down into a pretty small vehicle, which is, much smaller than an ambulance has any right to be. But my stance has always been prioritizing bot scale over vehicle scale. So if he needs to turn into a tiny ambulance to be a nice tall robot, have at it. Okay, it's time to transform Ratchet. So the first thing you want to do is remove his cannon here. Set it aside. You want to untab these front wheels here, the door area. Swing those open like so. Untab the forearms from the bottom if they're actually staying tabbed in there. They don't tend to really stay. You're going to flip this up. Swing all this out to the side like so. Go ahead, flatten all this stuff out right here. Then we're going to lift the front of the vehicle off the legs. Get that up and out of the way. Unfold the legs like so. just like that. Let's see, spin this around. Spin it like that. Start folding things in here. Kind of just like a big old origami mess halfway through transformation, but it'll all come together. All right, we're gonna swing that part in. Swing this bit up. So you want all this to kind of tuck up inside. Swing the back halves around, and you're gonna tab these little like door wing things into his back to hold everything together. So once you get in the holes, that kind of gets his torso put together. You're gonna bring this little cockpit chest area thing up and bring this panel over his head. And you're gonna get a tab in place here where you kind of push down on it, and there's a little tab right here on this gray bit that goes up inside the cockpit. So you just kind of push it down until it locks in. Make sure things don't come untabbed, which they very well could during the transformation. There you go. All right, almost there. Lastly, you flip the fists out. They lock into place. All right. You just spin his waist around and spin the legs around too. Whoopsie. Thought something looked wrong. All right, there. Now, this is our Bumblebee movie Ratchet. Look at that. So, very cool robot mode. He's very stocky looking and very much looks like a cross between his, Bayverse and G1 appearances. But then, as far as the actual details and the colors, he's G1 Ratchet through and through. So, when it comes time to give him his weapon, you can store it here. And I like the way this works because it's an actual rectangular hole that you put this tab in. So it just kind of slings across his back, all commando style, and stays in place. It doesn't rotate or spin around. So I think that's really nice. Oh yeah, also he's got light piping for his eyes. I mean, honestly, I think we could move past light piping in most cases. I don't think it works very well. So I would have rather just a solid white head with painted eyes, but oh well. Then we could also have him wield this big old honking cannon-like rifle thing. And, he looks pretty battle ready. He looks like he jumped right out of that end of days kind of scene in the intro to Bumblebee. So aesthetically, he's very pleasing. But how does the toy play? Well, there's some surprising engineering going on here. So the head, unsurprisingly, is on a ball joint, but ball joints are, good for heads. His shoulders are universal. Look at that. So you got like a swivel, and then it lifts up. And universal joints are not something you see often, especially at the deluxe price point in Studio Series. The only place we've seen a lot of that is the Studio Series 86 toys, which are basically proxy War for Seibertron toys anyway. So it does seem with this, new batch of Bumblebee movie toys, they're really aiming to kind of match that engineering quality, which is something I like to see. Because I always felt that Studio Series kind of lagged behind the other toy lines when it came to the engineering, right? They, a lot of the time, don't have ankle tilt, and they use a lot of ball joints and stuff. So I like seeing him get caught up there. He's got a bicep swivel, which is nice. Single bend elbows, which can actually bend backwards if you want to. No wrist articulation, which is a shame, but not surprising when the wrists swing out like that. Got a full waist swivel. Universal hips. On my copy, they're a little bit loose. Like, not so much where he's going to flop over, but where if you push him too hard, he might move a bit. Upper thigh swivel here. A really deep knee bend. Goes beyond a 90 there. And he has ankle tilt. It's not very far. It's about all you get out of it, but it's a lot better than most, so I'm not complaining. Might also help if I fixed his legs, huh? I'm just bad at this. I'm just terrible, guys. I'm the worst. Get up there. There you go. So, I think he looks phenomenal. I think he plays well. He's a really good-looking toy. And I'm really impressed by the, kind of jumping quality he has over previous Studio Series offerings, especially at the deluxe price point, which, admittedly, to me has felt very bland lately. Like, anything outside of your 86 stuff, I haven't been very excited for. They all just kind of start to blend together and look the same to me, which is a big part of the reason I haven't finished most of my reviews on that smaller Studio Series stuff, because I feel kind of uninspired. I hate saying that, but Oh, look. Blue robot that turns into a blue car that looks almost like this other blue robot that turns into a blue car. Like, well, okay. Here's another look at the backdrop, so we can see Ratchet's robot mode just valiantly defending his home world as the Decepticons move in. And I think this backdrop works for him very well because of his very bright white colors. He contrasts very well against the dark and, grim background here, and really helps him stand out against it. Except for maybe his rifle, which does kind of blend in a bit. But the rest of them, really pops against it. So I think it's a really solid choice for him. Now we have our robot mode comparisons with Siege Ratchet and 2007 Ratchet. And again, you can really see how this guy is almost a perfect blend of the two designs. You get what I was saying about like the profile and everything, the proportions? Like he's shorter than this one, but you can see how it's, relatively long, skinny legs, really wide torso, and then big like ornamentations around the shoulders. I don't know if that was like an intentional bit of design collaboration or they just end up by coincidence having like a relatively similar physique. Couldn't really tell you. But then at the same time, you can look at this and you just know that's Ratchet. You would recognize him by his, Generation 1 inspiration. He's got the colors, he's got the, crest on the helmet. Very clear who that is. In fact, his design looks very reminiscent of the War for Seibertron video game Ratchet. Like, the fine details aren't there, but the overall look, I'd say, is very similar. So you could kind of see this as, your War for Seibertron, Fall of Seibertron Ratchet toy that we never really got. And, he would not look out of place with, those other generations figures based on those games. In fact, he'd probably scale pretty well with them, too, because those guys tend to be on the small end. Now, again, it's a little weird seeing him be this short. Our Siege Ratchet is still the tallest, but even the Bayverse one, he's not much shorter. He's like a hair shorter than the Siege toy. This guy is just a little guy. So I guess instead of going for like a gentle giant, the Ratchet and Ironhide of this universe are more like stout little bruisers, which, can work for them. Again, different continuity. And I think as long as it, resembles the classic characters enough, people won't really have too many complaints. Because typically, ever since the 2007 movie and then, everything leading into like The Last Night, one of people's biggest complaints is that these characters look nothing like the depictions that we're used to. If you had never seen the movies and I asked you, who's this guy? Like, if your knowledge was only like, Generation 1 based, you would not be able to tell me. You'd have no idea. Unless maybe you just noticed that he looks like he might be an ambulance and then just guessed that it might be Ratchet. But, as far as character design, way out there. And most of the characters were like that. And I'm not against, doing something new and different. But I think when you are revisiting an established character, there should be some level of effort to make them look something like the character that they're meant to be a reference to. And I think that, it's funny because this is all based around an intro, a CGI intro scene that was actually thrown in there last minute. Originally wasn't even part of the movie. And there's so much hype generated about this. And I think, Paramount and Hasbro finally got the message, like, this is what we want. We want something that looks, vaguely Generation 1, vaguely familiar, and then you can have it take on a more, realistic and lifelike appearance. And I think that was a little bit of a straw man that people would, usually make, like, oh, you want everything to look like a Generation 1 cartoon. Now, don't get me wrong, there probably are people out there that literally wanted these guys to be just rectangles. But I think the vast majority of people's complaints were like, hey, look, we just want the characters to look something like the characters, right? Like, nobody hated the Fall of Seibertron game because the designs were different. Like, designs were familiar enough to where they could, recognize those characters in slightly new and interesting forms. Be like, oh, yeah, that's my guy. I had that toy when I was a kid. I love that guy. So I think they're really hitting the nail on the head here. I think they're fully embracing the Bumblebee movie, which is why so much of this year's Studio Series offerings are basically a split between Bumblebee and the 86 movie. Because, the fans have spoken. And I do know that there are some people that are, like, die-hard fans of the Bayverse, and I know a lot of them are very frustrated. But when you look at it from a sales perspective, these more familiar designs, they do better. There's more of a demand for them. And honestly, they're easier on the eyes. This guy, he kind of looks like a junk heap. This looks like a coherent robot. And I think Hasbro's kind of wisened up to that. And they're like, you know what? those very bland looking Studio Series toys we've been putting out, were like, I can't tell the difference between Jazz or Sideswipe at a glance, not really working, not selling super well. So I think this is going to prove to be a lot more successful, a lot more popular, and I think that's why it seems to be the aesthetic they're adopting for future movies. Now, we haven't seen too much from Rise of the Beast, but it's very strongly hinted that the characters are going to look a lot more like they did in Bumblebee than they did in the other live-action movies. And love it or hate it, I think that's the direction forward. And this completes our look at the new Bumblebee movie Ratchet. I have to say I very much like this toy. I like that it's this brand new mold, it's bringing us something new, and I love the fact that they're bringing the engineering up to being on par with your War for Seibertron and Legacy toys. I think it's going to make for a much more solid design. I think it's going to help the toy sell better once, word of mouth gets out that, hey, this thing's actually pretty good. And really, I have nothing to dislike the toy about. On my personal preference, I would have liked to see Ratchet be a little bit bigger, but I'm not going to hold that against the toy because this is a different character. So, the rules of the old one don't necessarily apply. And just the fact that he looks like Ratchet is more than good enough for me. I am surprised he gets this big old honking gun. Normally his weapons are a little more subtle than that, but it's still really cool and really helps flesh out, the 20 to 25 bucks you're going to spend on him. Because again, he is quite small, so he needs some good accessories to really help justify that price. But I do very much like him. I like both his robot mode and vehicle mode designs. They're both perfectly alien yet recognizable. And I just know he's going to look really good with, a shelf full of his other Autobot comrades from that scene, which, we're finally starting to get filled out now. So I highly recommend this toy. And, they're starting to show up on shelves and online now. So if you're in any way interested in, those B-movie characters, I would pick them up. I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised with this toy. That is, of course, just my take on Ratchet. So now I want to know what you all think of this figure. Is he a must-have for you? Do you like the way he came out? Or are you more critical? Either maybe you're just not interested in, Studio Series, the B-movie. I should say Bumblebee movie because B-movie might bring out some other film. Or maybe you just don't like the way the toy came out. He's too small for you. Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers Studio Series number 82, Ratchet. And with all that said, I will see you next time.